Hey, let's talk about editing. Hey, so now that we all have a story to work with, let's talk about editing. Let's talk about editing. Editing is the shifting, lengthening, shortening, rewording, shifting, changing of your story. It's the way you change your story, okay? You know what editing means. It encompasses a lot. It stays hot, baby. It stays real hot. All right, so editing encompasses the lengthening, shortening, expanding, cutting, shifting, rewording of your own personal narrative, okay? You know what editing is. Editing is a necessary and essential part of storytelling. It's absolutely crucial. It might seem tedious, it might seem overwhelming, it might even seem scary, especially if the thing that's being edited, cut down, and circled in red ink is your own personal memory. But I assure you, it's necessary and you absolutely must do it. You cannot get around editing. You have to edit your stories. So here's a couple things I'd like you to remember when we get into editing. In order to talk about editing, we should understand something about basic structure. And remember, I'm giving you tips on how to edit a personal narrative story, meaning a 5-minute story. Now, this is not going to be exactly the same if you're writing a story for a pilot or a play or whatever, but it's the same basic concept for a story, okay? So let's talk about structure. Here's my tips on how to edit the structure for a compelling 5-minute personal narrative story. First, I want you to remember that editing is I kind of just like do that every time. That editing is not an afterthought. It's absolutely a necessary part of storytelling. And you do it already. If your roommate says, "Hey, how was your day?" you probably tell the story a lot differently than if your parent or your sibling calls and says, "Hey, how was your day?" No, you tell it differently. These fucking planes. This is why people don't shoot on the roof. Editing is not an afterthought. It's essential. It's a necessary part of your whole process. Also, editing is done most efficiently when it's done aloud. You might be the kind of person who likes to write out your stories word for word, in a document, in a journal, whatever. I highly recommend you read your story aloud to yourself. Just in the mirror. Maybe do it with your eyes closed. After you read it word for word, maybe you try and repeat it back to yourself with your eyes closed. Just say it aloud. You really can't feel the rhythm of a story until you hear it out loud, so just say it out loud for yourself a couple times. Next, I want you to remember that technology is on your side. Have as many recording takes as you can of your story and save the best one. Listen to them back, label them, label the damn takes, and then save the best one. The one where you get the words right, the pacing right, you don't stumble or stammer, you remember all the important plot points, you feel funniest, whatever. But just save a good version of it so that when you need to come back and say, how does that story go? Let me refresh myself. You have a really good one to go off of. It's like a business card or a calling card. You know, if you were going to give your business card to someone for them to put in their Rolodex, you wouldn't give them one that's like stained with ketchup or bent at the corners or torn. You would give them a pristine copy so that whenever they think, "Hey, let me give this person a call," they have a beautiful calling card to remember you by. And for all the youngins who don't know what a Rolodex or a physical business card is, it's like taking a lot of selfies in really, really good lighting and then saving the best one, putting that one on social media, and then deleting the rest. Save one to remember the day. That's really good tea. Okay, all right, babes, let's talk about structure, okay? When I try and structure a story to be its most compelling, I try to establish a lot of really key things by what I call the 1-minute mark. The human adult has a very interesting attention span, and 1 minute is kind of all we have before we zone out and start thinking about other things. So The absolute best thing for you to do is to establish these things in the first minute, so we know what we're getting into. By the 1 minute mark in your story, you should be able to establish who you are as a narrator, your motivation, and that something's about to happen. I should know that I'm being told a story with action as a part of it. That's your goal for the 1 minute mark. And then from there, you can build from 1 minute to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then land the 5 minute mark, knowing exactly where you are each step of the way. It's really important to know what a minute is. Think of your story like increments of 1 minute, almost as if each minute of your story is like a magnetic wooden train car, and you can kind of arrange them, arrange things or take things away as needed. So in the first minute, you should be able to establish all of this about you, who you are, and give us a hint of where we're going. And then from about 1 minute to 3 minutes, that's when you build the action of the story. That's when the real plot points are dropped. That's when the problem arises. That's when it starts to build. Around 3 minutes is a great time, maybe 3.5, to build to or arrive at the climax of the story. To build to or arrive at the climax of the story. And then from about 3 minutes to 4 minutes, that's when I should be in the climax of the story. So we've got from start to 1 minute, establish who you are as a narrator and what's to come in the story. And also your motivations, we know why we care. From 1 minute to 3 minutes, that's when the plot thickens. That's when the problem arises and the action builds. From 3 minutes to 4 minutes, that's the climax of the story. This is what you've been working towards. This is what it builds to. This is what we've all been waiting for. And then from 4 to 5 minutes, that's where the story should shift into this wrap-up, resolution kind of area. It's also very important to note that your story must be active for at least the first 4 minutes. If you're telling a 5-minute story, the first 4 minutes should be incredibly active. It means you're going somewhere, you're seeing someone, you're having a conversation, you're walking to the store, you're running down the street, you're on the phone, you're fighting with someone, you're taking a test. And then in the last 30 seconds, that's when you can become reflective. That's when you can turn the key, take the key out of the ignition and think about where you've been and what you've done, what you've accomplished. So the first 4 minutes of your story should be really, really active, and the last minute you can let yourself be more reflective and less active. Thinking. That's the I'm thinking about something. I know it seems kind of formulaic, and obviously there's nuance, and everything is really subjective to the storyteller, but no matter what kind of story you're telling, quickly in the beginning you must establish who you are, what's going on, and why the heck should we care. That's if you're doing a TV pilot, if you're, writing a play. It can't take me, if you have a TV pilot that's 22 minutes, and by the 15th minute, I don't know why I'm watching these people, that's a bad pilot. You gotta establish it very quickly. In the first 20% of the show, in the first 20% of the story, I should know something about who I'm working with and who I'm dealing with and where we're going. Take me on a journey, drive the car, and give me a hint of where we're headed. This is the last thing that's, I think, kind of important to know. Sometimes it can feel a little intense working on these stories, and I want you to remember that the things we're editing, the things we're cutting down and expanding and shifting and changing and working on, they exist outside of you, They exist outside of yourself. That's another reason why it's so helpful for you to tell someone, because once you can get that story from inside of you out into the world and you share it with someone else, that's when you can start to really pick at it, look at it objectively, edit it, and it doesn't feel so precious. It doesn't feel like you're critiquing or changing yourself. You're looking at artwork that you've made and that you objectively can analyze and dissect as needed. Editing is really, really important. It's really essential, it's really crucial, and you gotta know how to cut things up,